Alright, so this is going to be a post-fight review of the Shiming versus Prasitsak Phaprom title fight for the vacant WBO World Flyweight Championship. A fight in which Shiming pretty dominantly defeated Phaprom. Um, Basically 120 to 107 on two cards, 119 to 108 on the third card. He managed to drop Phaprom in the second round. Pretty much a balanced shot, but of course, he had already defeated this same fighter for several fights before, way back in 2014 on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao versus Chris Algieri. Busting him up, was able to cleanly defeat him back then, was able to basically do the exact same thing here again. I thought he showed a little bit better overall technique. Seemed a little bit sharper. Wasn't quite getting as wild. Just kind of doing things just to do them. Although in the later rounds he definitely got a little bit more flashy. He was doing a lot of taunting, kind of goading Phaprom in, having some fun in there with him. Messing around. Got his wife a little bit pissed off because I guess she didn't like him sticking his chin out there. Daring Phaprom to hit him and stuff like that. But I mean, overall, he was just too fast, too physical, too much of everything. Just overall, too skilled, too good of an athlete, too good of a fighter. Just overall. So he, of course, won and finally managed to get himself a world championship. Of course, his original title shot was against Amna Ronrong. Where he wasn't quite able to defeat him. Got lost a pretty clear-cut decision, albeit a competitive one. And now here against Phaprom, he managed to take a title, incidentally, that was actually recently vacated by Juan Francisco Estrada. Of course, a very well-known, former flyweight champion, fringe pound-for-pound level type of fighter. And interestingly enough, Shiming, after this fight, actually said that he would be willing to fight Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, in which he would, of course, have to go up a weight class up to 115. Be really interesting because of the fact that I think Shiming, just generally speaking, isn't even necessarily the most physically dominant fighter at flyweight. That he's a guy that was making weight same day weigh-ins at 106, 108 pounds his entire amateur career. When he turned pro, with the 24-hour weigh-in, you'd think, oh, well, he'd be able to make 105, 108 easy, but he actually decided to move up to 112, campaign there. And against Amna Ronrong, I think you saw a lot more of his overall physical limitations, albeit Ronrong himself is a very large flyweight, a guy that eventually wasn't even able to make super flyweight. He weighed in at damn near bantamweight back when he fought John Rio Casimiro in the rematch when he wound up losing, and then, of course, eventually fought as a 132-pounder, lightweight, basically, in the Olympics just recently. But in spite of that, I think Shiming overall, his physicality isn't quite there where he's able to just completely overwhelm a guy the way he could theoretically do at 105 or 108, or the way he actually did do at 106 and 108 back in the amateurs. But at 115, I think that would be a step in exactly the wrong direction. At 112 pounds, I do think that he's still very viable as a top fighter. Him versus Dani Nietes, I think, is a toss-up type of fight. Him versus Kazuto Ioka, I think, is a very good matchup. A toss-up type of fight. I think that Shiming definitely has advantages in hand speed, and foot speed. Even though Kazuto Ioka is more, technically a better boxer, I think, as well as just a very heavy-handed guy. Great body work. Just a very powerful type of fighter. John Rio Casimiro is another guy. A guy that he can be outboxed, can be spoiled a little bit, but a guy that packs a punch of his own. A guy that is definitely a knockout threat pretty much as long as he's standing up, as long as the fight is on and the final bell hasn't rung yet. He's definitely a threatening type of fighter. Should he happen to have to fight his mandatory next, that being Dani Nietes, who just recently vacated his 108-pound title and moved up to 112, I think that's an excellent fight. It's basically two top 5 fighters at the weight class facing off against each other. You really can't get too much better than that. Should he decide to move up to 115 pounds, I mean, I don't necessarily, even though I don't think it's in his best interest, I mean, I'm not necessarily entirely against it because Shiming brings big purses, he brings big money, big ratings, and I definitely think that the likes of Roman Gonzalez and some of these other guys deserve the spotlight, deserve the bigger money, the bigger ratings, and Shiming could be a vehicle in order to kind of serve that up to Gonzalez, as well as Gonzalez's future opponents, the likes of Inoue, Quadras, Estrada, and so on. But just a good performance from Shiming. I do still think that, you know, against just about anybody at 112 and below, he's, you know, it's 50-50, if not, you know, maybe just a little bit less than that for him to, in terms of possibility of winning and, you know, being just a top flight, you know, elite level champion. Beyond that, though, like I couldn't see him being really all that competitive. Well, I mean, maybe a little bit competitive, but not, and it wouldn't end well, I don't think, if he were to fight somebody like a Roman Gonzalez, a Juan Estrada, Naoya Inoue, Carlos Cuadras. You know, those guys are just on a whole nother level compared to anybody that Zhou Shiming's fought, and him and Zhou Shiming himself. But as far as like the Iokas, the Casimeros, and the Nietas of the world, I think he's very, very much live against any of those type of fighters. I think any of those fights are really excellent to be made, and those are the fights I generally prefer, as opposed to him just kind of serving himself up essentially in order for, you know, the fighters at super flyweight to eat off of his name. But, you know, if he chooses to do that, you know, it's definitely his prerogative, even though I would definitely advise against it. But Zhou Shiming's always pretty interesting to watch. He has a fun style. He goes in there. He's trying to be flashy. He throws a lot of punches, very quick. You know, just an interesting fighter to watch overall. And I think even against guys that could potentially, you know, blow him out, I think it'll be a fun fight. You know, he's a fun fighter to watch. He has an action style like an Amir Khan, like a Manny Pacquiao. You know, just very flashy. A lot of athleticism involved, a lot of speed, explosiveness involved. Even though he's not the most powerful of puncher, he's a bit more of a slapper. But, you know, that's just what you get with Zhou Shiming. You know, he's a fun fighter to watch. It'll be definitely interesting to see where he goes from here. And I definitely want to see that Donny Nietas fight. Very good fight. A bit of a step back up towards that I'm Not Wrong level for Zhou Shiming. And I think he's a bit better prepared for it now than he was back when he fought Wrong. And especially against Nietas, a guy that's not necessarily the kind of physical dynamo, or like just the physical, you know, brute that Wrong was, but is a bit more of a technical type of a fighter, be a bit more of a technical difficulty for Zhou Shiming as opposed to a physical difficulty, which Wrong was. But I think it's a very interesting fight, and I'm hoping that it gets made, as well as some of the other flyweights that I mentioned, the Ioka, Casimero, the possibility of Choritos Hernandez and Narpan Kaikana happening next year as well. I think Zhou Shiming against any of those guys would be fantastic fights. A lot of talent flowing through flyweight, even though some of the bigger names have already left for the 115-pound division. But that's pretty much all I got to say about Zhou Shiming. Of course, I'm going to just do a whole recap of the entire Pacquiao versus Vargas card, and this is the first video, so catch you guys on the next one. Peace.